second module. I'm Jayoung. I teach Korean here at CLIC.
And I'm Divya. I teach Hindi. And we're going to give our presentation together because we have just one mic that we have. So we just stay next to each other.
Okay, so in the previous session, we talked about the value of authentic material. In this module, we're going to talk about how to find the authentic material and how to organize the massive data that you found online and how to convert it to a teachable material. So this will be the outline of our presentation. We will first talk about establishing usefulness of authentic material in class, followed by finding sources of authentic data and organizing authentic data, examples of data to teaching, and then we will do some hands-on activity just like what you did. Before we go on to our module, I'd like to introduce an activity that I do with the students before I bring the material, authentic material, into a class. If I just bring the material, several hands goes up. Oh, so is it going to be on the exam? So if students don't see the value of authentic data, they will just think of it as external work, extra work that they have to do. So I'll do this with you. So I'll play 2 audio files. You can listen and guess which is authentic material and which is scripted textbook conversation.
안녕하세요. 저는 마이클 정.
Okay. Okay.
안녕하세요. 저는 마이클 정이에요. 이름이 뭐예요?
소피아 왕이에요. 반갑습니다.
소피아 씨는 한국 사람이에요?
아니요. 한국 사람 아니에요. 중국 사람이에요.
아, 그래요. 저는 한국 사람이에요.
Okay. And the second recording.
안녕하세요. 성함이 어떻게 되세요?
제 이름은 한은영이라고 합니다.
네. 저는 송자영이에요.
어디서 오셨어요?
한국에서 왔어요. 어디서 오셨어요? 한국 사람이세요?
네네.
네.
여기 어떻게 오신 거예요?
라이트 대학에
Okay. Okay, so what do you think is the authentic data? It's very tricky, right? Yeah, and why? Why do you think this is authentic data? Yeah, noise. And?
The pattern is, it's not something like it's spontaneous. And
Yeah, there are some overlap between the conversation. Okay, right? So I do this activity in class so that our students can raise their awareness toward the usefulness of authentic data. And then Divya will talk about where to find the authentic material and how to organize it.
So first step when we are creating material from authentic data is to get the data, right? So I want to ask you, where do you get your authentic data from? So what are the different sources that you have that you might have probably discussed in the previous activity? Where do you get your authentic data from? Anybody want to share? YouTube, yes. What else? Pinterest. Okay. Newspapers, okay. Anything else?
some magazine,
Some magazines?
French magazine.
Yes. So these are all written form of authentic data. Do you also use spoken authentic data in your classrooms? YouTube? Yes. Okay.
TV channels.
TV channels?
From YouTube, sorry.
Right.
Everything on YouTube.
Right. TV channels on YouTube now? Okay. So we will have some of these here too. So you have audio recorded authentic conversations, video recordings of authentic conversations that can be found on YouTube, for example, scripted media that's found on the internet, scripted interactions. So for example, you want to teach your students how to make requests, but you cannot find any data, any video that that shows somebody making a request for something. So what do? You find two native speakers, you give them prompts, you have to request for something, you have to deny the request. You video record the interactions and use the resulting interaction in class, so that's your data. And then you could also find data on corpus of authentic language data, and some of these are on your handouts, page number 10 of your handout for Chinese, Portuguese, and Spanish. So at CLIC, we currently use all these authentic sources of data, and why I'm talking about this is to really emphasize that not all of us would have access to all forms of authentic language data. Depending on the language, depending on the time you have, depending on your resources, you would have access to one authentic data more than over the other. So the majority of us actually rely here on audio recorded authentic conversations that we maybe, for example, like me, sneakily put it when you are having dinner with your friends. They don't know they are being recorded. They were told at the beginning of the friendship that they would be. They are recorded now, right? So you have a lot of audio recorded authentic conversations. This data is also accessible at the CLIC website. So if you go to the CLIC website, Bridging Research and Practice website, we have curated all the data for you that we have collected by topic, by proficiency level, suggestions for what language objectives you can use it to teach. And the links are also shared on the handout that you have been given. So you have authentic data. What do I do other than being just super overwhelmed? So you can go two ways about it. One is you could go from data to the teaching objective, or you could go from the teaching objective to language data. Luciris already showed you an example of going from teaching objective to language data. So she had her us form that she uses for us commands, right? And she identified the objective and then thought about what are the different situations where we use these commands and then look for data. So she already gave you an example of that. I will talk about how I went this semester looking through my data for certain teaching objectives. So the first thing that I did, thanks to Helade, was analyzing language data for different linguistic topics. So I had about 39 minutes of a conversation, and that's just one sample, and I had about 7 to 8 samples like those. I was overwhelmed. I did not know where to start. So I went to Helade, and she suggested one of the things that you should do is that you should listen to your data and analyze it for what are the different topics that you can use it to teach. So those topics could be related to grammar, vocabulary, and because a lot of my focus is on communication, because my language textbook doesn't talk about it, I focus on communicative features. So I play the audio and then pause, note down what are the segments, what feature they are talking about, and move on. So like this, I have my own personal corpus. So I have the topics, for example, small talk, how was weekend, internship plans, summer plans. This is the conversation between a tutor and a teacher. And in terms of communicative features, I also sequence it by greeting, how do we keep the conversation moving. And it's really interesting because there's also a power dynamic here, right? There's a tutor and a teacher. So it would be a different conversation than it would be, for example, with friends over dinner. So I have, for the same communicative feature, for example, keeping the conversation going, I have 2 different sets of audio recordings, and I can bring it to class to talk about how things would change when you change the dynamics of the conversation. Then I also found this TV show that I could use the same process with. So this is one of the TV shows back home that talks about, that's focused on lives of high school students. And so the topics that it has, the language that it has is still very relevant for students, for language learners of Hindi. So, and especially one of my favorite things is this episode 5, which talks about not participating in a conversation, because it's relatively easier to find how to keep a conversation going than it is to find somebody who is not really interested in talking to you. So this is a conversation between a mother and a son, where the mother is really trying to ask how his day was, and the child doesn't want to oblige. So he doesn't share. So it is a nice contrast to what you can find in the audio recorded conversations. Again, to say not one source of data is necessarily better than the other, but given your goals for your classroom, given what you think are the needs of your learners, what you think they should learn, you could select different data from different sources. Again, it is time consuming, but think of it as all the best lesson plans that you make that take effort. Once it's done, then it's not as time consuming to improvise it later, right? So you can keep adding on to it. So what I have been doing since is I just type the search word in my Excel sheet, and then I have results, and I have these data that I can use for different activities too. So you can have it for introduction, you could have it for assessment later, you could have it for practice, but you have different source of data sorted by different themes that I have in terms of language features or communicative features. And now Jayoung is going to talk about, once you have collected this data, you have identified the objectives, how do you go about teaching it?
Okay, so now you know the value of authentic data. Students know you collected the data, you organized it, and then how do you convert it to a teaching material? I'm going to introduce step-by-step activity that I do in class. So I got this data. I'll play this one, and you can guess what I chose to teach from this data. So these are the tutors, Korean tutors working at CLIC, but I asked them to just converse in English freely.
Hi, my name is Jeremy. What's yours?
I'm Connie. Nice to meet you.
What are some of your hobbies?
I like to go swimming and read during my free time. What about you?
Oh, that's cool. My friends and I like to go shopping together, and as well as sightseeing. Yes.
Where do you want to travel then?
Oh, I really want to go to Korea.
Oh, so you've never been to Korea before?
No, have you been to Korea?
Yeah, I actually went last year as an exchange student.
Really?
Yeah.
How was it?
It was really, really nice.
What was your favorite part of Korea?
I really liked traveling around, especially to Jeju Island and Busan.
Wow, that sounds really fun.
Yeah.
I really want to go to Korea.
I hope you can go too.
Okay, so within the group, you can guess what I chose to teach from this data. Okay, I'll give you 1 minute. What's particular about this thing, this data?
Just make sure you say that this is the first step, the activity, so it raises awareness. Most of my part is done. You need a... How does it go?
Okay, so what do you think? Okay. Okay, so let's share together. What do you think I chose from this data? Do you think it's vocabulary, certain grammar structure? Which one? Communication. What part of communication? Interaction. More specifically? So I chose this data to teach understanding English listener feedback. So listener feedback. So in textbook only talks about how to speak, but it doesn't really teach how to listen in a foreign language. So I chose this data to talk about how listeners should react in the conversation. as you can see, Jay says, oh, that's cool. So listeners just don't stand there doing nothing. Listeners constantly do something in order to show their understanding. Or like this, oh, really? So listeners make acknowledgement. Listeners show the speaker that she has received the information and acknowledges it. But textbook doesn't really talk about this. So I chose this data to talk about this in my class. So this is pre-activity. So I chose English data so that students can raise awareness toward how listener feedback works in English. And then I bring Korean data. So this is actually the handout that students got. So this is the video clip transcription, and I ask students to figure out what listener feedback that they found in the video clip. And then its functions. So oh can function in many ways. Oh is different from uh-oh. So even though it's the same oh, it has various functions. And students can figure out that by doing this activity. And step 2 is the main activity. You bring your target language data. So I brought my Korean data, and then I asked students to listen and figure out Korean listener feedback. Do people note more or do show more listener feedback in Korean language? So I'll play this video, and you can kind of compare. So this is the data that I got from my student. So this one is my student's friend, and it was her final project. Just meet with the native speaker and talk about some free topics. Okay.
주지 그러면 졸업하고 뭐 해요? 대학원에 가요. 대학원 어디 가요? 멋있다. 너무 멋있다. 무슨 과목? 경제학. 네. 경제학이요. 와, 손에 춥죠. 네. 아주 춥죠. 네.
So as you can see, Koreans tend to show more listener feedback. So they do a lot of really, but it's an empty question. It doesn't really question the validity of what the speaker has said. It's just, oh, I'm listening. Oh, is that so? So students can figure out these differences by listening to this authentic data. So this is the handout, step 2, Korean data, and then they are asked to analyze Korean listener feedback examples and its functions. Is it just empty question? Is it a filler? Or is it assessment? And then after students learn these things, they are asked to produce listener feedback. So in the worksheet, I bring another data. It's a new data. And then before I play this data, I give them a script with the fill in the blanks chart so that students can guess how the listener would have reacted in this situation. So they fill in the blanks first with their own guess based on what they just learned. And then they talk about it with classmates. And then I play the video, and then students can check if they got it right or wrong. And then discussion. So after students do this activity, I want to see if students understood everything that was covered in class. So I give them a homework. Okay, so now you meet with your native speaker and then talk about certain topic freely. And then try to incorporate listener feedback in your conversation. And then submit your video file and analysis of your listener feedback and your native speaker's listener feedback. So that's the homework that they get as a evaluation. Okay, so in summary, so you can collect the data and then you can analyze it with your own method, and then you can do pre-activity in order to raise students' awareness toward the function that you are going to teach, and the main activity using the authentic data, followed by application of target objective by the students. So let them produce something. And then finally, you can assess assessment activity to test students' learning of the objective. So this is what I do with authentic material in class.
So this is all the steps summarized. I do want to emphasize here that this is a good place also to bring for you your textbook, right? So for example, you used, for example, in my lesson on imperatives, I actually used my textbook dialogue, but left it incomplete with fill in the blanks, where students have to predict what verb goes in. So something that I could have used with my authentic data, I used with my textbook, just modified it a little bit because I wanted them to focus on the form, right? Again, when you are having students practice the structure in speech or fill in the blank exercises, if there is a homework, there is opportunity for you to bring the textbook. You do not have to have for each stage of your lesson authentic data. It's not just exclusive to that. Final thoughts, yes, using authentic data in the language classroom is time consuming, but given the benefits, given what you can see your students be able to do is far more rewarding, and actually that makes it worth it. Yes, it's easier to say when I have spent a whole semester, it's behind me, I do not have to think about all the hours I spent on it. In retrospect, it's really good. At that time, it's really stressful, but yes, it is all worth that work. And like Helade said in the beginning, it is really useful to collaborate with the colleagues. I am the only Hindi instructor here, as Jayoung is the only Korean instructor here, but we have found it really useful when we see material that is developed by our colleagues, for example, Spanish, French, Italian, other languages, because you can see, oh, this is something that maybe I can explore in my own language. This is a lesson plan that I can actually use for my class. So collaborating with a colleague also actually really helps inspire you also in that direction and give you ideas about how to use and approach authentic data. And again, finally, you have to use authentic materials where you think you can use it, when you can find it, and for the needs that you're trying to meet of your learners. So,
yeah, one note. So it's not included in this video clip, but another one was basically the native Korean speaker says, oh, really? Every time when they hear something. And I think students found it very interesting because English speaker doesn't really do that. So after I taught this lesson, they made their Facebook group, and Korean Facebook group, and they named it, oh, really?